Okay, so welcome everyone to episode 18 in our What If interview series, where we discuss and share knowledge on customer experience, digital transformation, and how to better serve customers via digital channels. My name's Luke Stamper, and I'm a content marketing executive for Mando. We're a digital agency committed to simplifying digital experiences for everyone. We work within regulated industries with energy, utilities, and financial services companies, focusing on helping our customers to do those tasks they don't really want to do. So we don't all wake up on a Saturday morning excited about paying our water bill or submitting an insurance claim. We make those experiences much easier, giving time back to customers so they can do more exciting things. So today our title of the webinar is What If Adaptability Was the New Competitive Advantage? We welcome our guest, Mando's CEO and Chair of BEMA Northwest, Ian Finch. Over the last 23 years, Ian has built Mando into a company that reacts positively to change, stays ahead of the curve with advancements in technology, and adapts to ever-changing market needs. Today, he joins us to share his experience and knowledge around building a team and culture that is agile and resilient. Just before we get started, I just want to let you all know that my colleague, Sarah Davies, is on the call with us too. Sarah's helping with logistics and will be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions throughout the course of the conversation, just pop them into the chat window and I'll make sure to add them at the end. We'll be chatting around 20 minutes-ish and then we'll move on to some questions. So without further ado, I've kept you waiting for a little while there, Ian. Good morning. Could you introduce yourself for us, please, and give us a little bit of information about your background?
Yeah, sure. So it's good to be talking to everyone today. In terms of my background, I am Mando man and boy. So we set up Mando pre-Google in '97, and so have experienced quite a lot of changes in the market, in government, in digital over those what will be 24 years in September this year. I think during that time, from startup to now, I've managed, I think, all but one department in Mando, one way or another. So hopefully have some experience of taking on new challenges and being agile in our approach. We've worked and lived and survived and thrived through 3 recessions and changes of government and everything else. So hopefully I can share some stories today that will help you guys understand you and your journey in your organizations. Right now, today, my role, and has been for a few years, is MD. And within that, very simply, I manage the direction of a business and I direct the management.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Ian. So to kick off the conversation, what I usually like to do is discuss a couple of stats around today's area of discussion. Today's topic is all about how companies can be more adaptable, how they can catch the wave of change, and what they can do to overcome industry challenges. So a couple of stats around that is, of the companies listed on the Fortune 500 in 1955, only 12% of those companies remain there in 2014, meaning that 88% of those original companies either went bankrupt, merged, or fell from grace due to decreased total revenues. And according to research by Dell Technologies, 85% of the jobs that today's learners will be doing in 2030 haven't even been invented yet. We know that businesses are tasked with overcoming changes in technology, shifts in industry best practice, and responding quickly to market changes. To get us started, what would be your summary of the current issues? And what are the main challenges that the businesses that you meet are facing?
So I think within what we do, our sphere of influence of Mando, the customers that I spend time with and talk to, the research we do, both in Mando and also in BEMA, it's always about business change. Hence, this topic today is so close to my heart. And you know, those stats are quite something, aren't they? Only 12% of companies over 50 years remained in the Fortune 500. You know, things change. But in terms of how many leadership teams those companies will have gone through in 50 years, probably tons, probably at least 5 to 10 changed the leadership team or CEO changes, if not more. And there'll have been real highs and there'll have been some real lows along the way. And for me, it comes always back to the mission, vision, values, and purpose of an organization. The leadership's focus on spotting changes in the market for the product and product development, spotting in changes in themselves, and what worked yesterday might not work tomorrow, and we have to be open to that and not stuck in our ways. Society changes. The next range of employees will have a different generational vibe to the ones before, and so this change is constant. Accepting that and then looking for it and working towards that and being aware is absolutely critical. Whether we're a massive Fortune 500 company or you're us, an agency of 60 people, adapting and flexing our offer and our services to our customer base. The main challenges businesses then face is acting on that change. Embracing it is part of it, not having that kind of flight, freeze, or fight response. Well, fight's not so bad, but flight and freeze, you've got to be intentional about those. Freezing's not an option. Flight is if you're just going to have to fail quickly and move on. But we see companies that froze, like the really well trodden examples like Kodak and Blockbuster. Blockbuster froze. When it had Netflix for $1 million, I think, as so the story goes. I'm not particularly aware of it. Most people have heard of it, but that freezing bit is the worst thing that anyone can do. And so it's about accepting the brutal truth, or rather accepting the truth, however brutal or indeed positive, but knowing it, being intentional, looking at the market, the people, culture, service offering, thinking about what's next, and staying in that present mindset, looking at what's going on, looking to the future, making as good a decisions as you can.
So what do you think businesses are doing to overcome that challenge, to fight the freeze, for want of a better way of putting it?
Yeah, so we work with amazing people and amazing clients, and so these stories resonate from our own experience, but also the customers we work with. We obviously work with customers who are committed to change. We operate in a digital transformation space, usually with two very, very key KPIs of improving customer satisfaction on behalf of our customers and reducing the cost to serve those customers for our customers. And so being aware of what's going to satisfy an end customer and being aware of how to do it more cost effectively and make your team thrive is a constant challenge. And so we're always surrounded and working with people in that change space. And the challenges I see, there's always four levers of financial resources, people resources, time. And these are your classic project management paradigms of time, resource, and money. But I'd add in a fourth in terms of our experience, which is level of discomfort. And there's a real psychological element when we're factoring business change about just how intent people are to embrace that uncertainty, how able the organization is to adapt to uncertainty and manage it. So I always try and bring in that kind of almost psychological safety aspect to business change, and the quality of the conversation and the openness of the partnership and the openness of the relationship, and how that works through from the product owner to the senior executive to the procurement department, how contracts are in, all factor in, and it's highly complex. And the bigger the organization, the more moving parts there are. But I see people overcome these challenges, and it's one step at a time. There is no light switch that makes this work. It's a direction of travel and a series of minute steps, incremental gains that all get to that place where you want to be in the future.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'll move on slightly, just onto the sort of the way that we do these webinars is a little bit about the before, a little bit about the now, and a little bit about the future. With that in mind, what would you say are the most significant changes to have happened in the last, let's say, 10 years?
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, where do you start, really? But I think for me, there are some really key things, particularly in our context, in the context of this discussion, is that within business change and digital transformation and digital per se, it's got to be channel shift is the biggest thing in the last 10 years. Might argue it's a bit more than that. But in terms of acceleration over the last 10 years, to an extent, we actually think the job's done, but it's not. It's not. Transformation will continue for another 10 and probably another 10 after that. And the way technology advances, it'll only keep momentum. But going from sending letters out and statements and getting checks back to and I remember doing our first e-billing swap over for a utilities site 12 years ago, and that was like a monumental shift, and we were saving millions in stamps and envelopes, but we've come a long way since then, and the majority of our work is, as I mentioned, reducing customer satisfaction, reducing the cost to serve those customers, which is all about building more and more features and service offering within a kind of self-serve space, and my account kind of space, and that's just increasing momentum the whole time. But that, for me, is a major story of the last 10 years. Other key things are tech advancements, obviously, the fact that advances within cloud computing to allow that data processing power, so things that used to take in data terms years to process or would have to be manual because the computers couldn't cope with it, can now be done in hours with cloud. The ability to scale on demand allows brands to interact with consumers in an unparalleled way. The fact that you can consume services and just connect to them. If I go back longer than 10 years, maybe more like 20, customers used to say, well, we want a search facility, can you make it like Google? And you're like, well, if I had $1 billion investment, then I can make it like Google. That doesn't happen anymore, because really can just connect to Google or the equivalent thereof. And so being able to have natural language selection, multi-language selection, intelligent search, AI-driven frequently asked questions and something like that, just being able to connect to it, not develop this stuff, which would have taken months or man years previously, but just connect to it. It's massive in terms of your enabling of self-serve and so on. And then, of course, massive things like consumer behavior changes. Brands aren't in control of what you know about their product. We all get referrals from our friends, from influencers, the rise of social and the way people interact with brands, and the always-on nature of things, which, of course, means the other key component is that we're all mobile. And so our job is about pushing the right interactions, right knowledge to the person ahead of when they need it, so they can make a decision at the right time, in the right location, on the right device, in the right way, to allow a quick decision. So for me, they're the absolute key things for the last 10 years.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So we'll move slightly more into the present day. It almost goes without saying that the last 12 months have been exceptionally challenging for businesses. And unfortunately, some haven't managed to stay afloat. We've been incredibly fortunate, and we've continued to serve our customers in regulated industries throughout the entirety of the pandemic. How would you describe what we've managed to overcome in the last 12 months, and what have we done to maintain agility, the agility that's been crucial to serving our customers?
So within a Mando context, our work is primarily about channel shift, my account development, self-serve. And so in a pandemic world, that channel shift is ever more relevant. And so, we weren't always focused like this. If you go back, we did a lot of kind of experiential marketing work and so on and so forth. So I can't deny we're in the right place at the right time for us. And that's worth calling out. We're not magic, but nonetheless, you do make your own luck. And so we've been very focused over the last few years about our target market and the value we bring and so on. And we've been in situations in the past where I go back to when Adore's first got in 2010, 90% of our client base is public sector. And what we thought we had 9 months to change, we ended up having 2 weeks to change. And so I know what it looks like when you're in a panic station as well. But coming back to the present day, things we did that I think were good decisions is we'd already set up our office for hybrid working anyway, a couple of years earlier, with knowing that eventually we would reach capacity, and then after that it would be much more of a hybrid working arrangement, hot desks and so on. So we were set up. So when lockdown happened, I think we had a few things to do with our firewall to allow more bandwidth through into the company, but essentially IT was sorted in a day. What wasn't sorted in those first few weeks was exactly what channel of communication for what. And we had some horror stories about people being on Teams and a Zoom invite coming in and getting Slack message, and then someone calling going, why haven't you replied to this? And then email and going, why aren't you talking to me? And so really putting in some governance and some structure with people about the right tools for the job and how to manage our days when we couldn't just turn around and talk to the person next to us, but you invaded their screen real estate with a message and so on. So we tackled that early on. Secondly was that thing about embracing the truth and accepting it early. And so very early on we said, look, this isn't going to be a week or two, guys. So go to the office, get your chair, make your environment nice. Some of us that wasn't easy, and so we did what we could to support those that need a bit extra support at home. But let's settle in for the longer term. This is going to be a seismic shift. We are going to remote work for the foreseeable future. So let's get used to it and accept that within ourselves and go, right, this is new reality now. What do we do? So we did quite a lot of training around that. We also had some big decisions to make about how much of a war chest we build up with what's to come. And so we certainly cut our cloth accordingly. We reduced spend in certain areas, but we invested heavily in communication training. We'd been talking about getting some sales training support in anyway. And then you make these decisions about what you invest in. But we felt we're never going to have a more, in a positive way, a captive audience that we've got now. People aren't going to be on trains and not going to be working longer hours because of travel around the country or even the commutes, where everyone's actually got some hours back and we'll have some time to focus. And so, but that sales training thankfully turned into much wider communication training about how we interact with each other, how we stare at a screen, which I'm probably failing a little bit today. My camera's here, but my face is here. It's really hard not to look at my face, not because I'm a narcissist, but the way it works.
You're absolutely right.
Trying to engage people online, and that's the same with each other, and how we build relationship over screens. And we really invested in a wellness program that incorporated training, a learning platform. But our HR manager, I've got to give her a special shout out. She's talked to every single person within the business minimally every fortnight since lockdown began, on top of her job, just to check in how people are doing, where they're at, the wellness aspect, and really investing in mental health has been not 100% success, because people get sick and loved ones have died of COVID in Mando, and everyone's felt the effects, and it's got worse in 2021 than it was in 2020 in a lot of ways. But I think that's been a really positive step for us. And I'm saying what we've done, compared notes with other people in the Beamer community I've run with other agencies and IT firms and brands. And it's a similar story for those that have been successful, is a really heavy investment in people and wellness.
Brilliant. So I'm going to move on to my favourite bit, which is the future. It's clear to see that there's been seismic changes across the industry in the last 12 months, but change is a constant, and it's always been there. It's always been something that we all need to embrace: technologies, market shifts, and adapting to industry-specific changes. What do you think are going to be the next big changes in, again, let's say the next 10 years?
So I think firstly, I have to accept I'm not a futurist. I'm probably on a spectrum more I have my visionary aspects, and we've been able to pivot over the last 3 years, but probably pragmatism is more where I'm at. But yeah, so if you're expecting any kind of pigs in space or we're all on Mars, probably not going to give you much of those kind of thoughts. But for me, I think we've had this massive shock to the system. And what was inevitable about hybrid working over time, everyone's done it, or everyone's gone remote. I know so many companies have actually closed their office over the last 6 months ago. We're remote working now, that's it. So what was inevitable anyway, probably over a longer period of time, has happened in the last 6 to 12 months. And we need to understand what that looks like. We need to understand whether it persists, when lockdown closes. And I think certainly in Mando, we're not going to be an office-based business. We're not going to be remote either, but we will be hybrid. And so what does that actually look like? What do we need to invent? And so I think within the next 10 years, immediately there's a settling in period. And again, from a society perspective, yeah, it's a pandemic. But also I think everything else in the UK, we've obviously had Brexit, which, I'm not particularly bold about Percy Pigs, if I'm honest, in Marks and Spencer's in Ireland. But that gives you a tip of the iceberg of what's going to happen in terms of all the ands, ifs and buts over the next few years. And so we need to understand what that looks like. We need to understand what the economic impact is going to be. And, this societal change in the UK is going to be huge. If anything, on a world stage, we're in a post-truth, alternative facts era, which is going to drive our behavior about investigating authenticity. And those of us that I think have a brand value that is about honesty and transparency and a partnership nature, we will need to invest in it. But the brands that aren't authentic but do hide stuff, but we're going to be found out because people have been so hyper alert to it, in my opinion. And that's just Trump and Brexit. Then we've got the race riots in America and Black Lives Matter. That was quite soon after to Me Too. There's a real anxiety in society, and a lot of our norms and our baseline expectations going to change. So I really think next thing is there's going to be a bedding in around that, and a continuation of some of the stuff I said before around the way people interact with brands. If people are waking up at 100% capacity, maybe over, and are generally anxious as a background to society, it's going to affect your working day. So we have to accept and normalize that this is our new reality. Massively invest in people, massively invest in health and wellness, and giving people the right training and the soft skills as well as the hard skills in coping with what is thrown at them in the workplace, in the working day. So we're going through incredible change as society. We need to invest in people to equip that change, and we work in digital change. So it's only going to accelerate. And we're at a point in society where, like we say, for the first time in history, people are now catching up with technology. For all the other rest of human history, technology has been catching up with people. So it's how we use the technology and how we readily accept that and embrace this inevitability towards ever more self-serve, ever more online working, ever more online interactions, without losing our humanity. And simple things like, it might suit me if I'm awake in the middle of the night to send an email at 3 a.m. because it clears my head. It's not going to help someone else if they've woken up early to get an email from the MD at 5 a.m. because it's just that little bit more incremental pressure. And so what am I going to do about that? How can I own that? How can I lead the way in balance? How can we put appropriate boundaries in place between ourselves and our own company and other companies? And for me, it's much more about anthropological change and interacting with people and partnership and getting humanity back into what we do in this new world. because the rate of technological advancement will increase no matter what. And yes, it's going to be more cloud, more faster processing, bigger, better, quicker. It's going to have more and more AI driven activities and more automation, all of which we need to govern. And so I think for me, certainly the first half of those next 10 years are about accepting that and getting in a place of control and making technology enable us rather than this hamster wheel of chasing after technology. Because not every new technology is going to work. You've got to really pick and choose the horses that you back. And yeah, I could geek out on bits of AI, bits of cloud, and headless content management and AI-driven experience platforms, but I don't really feel that's what is really the core of agility. I think it's behavior and values and the way we run our organizations.
Absolutely. That's fascinating. Though I must say, I don't share your stance on Percy Pigs. I was utterly heartbroken with that news. Utterly heartbroken. Okay. So before we move on to some questions from today's audience, I just want to ask one last thing. Whilst we keep our webinars conversation-led and explore the key issues, we also like to focus on the practical suggestions that people can take away and implement into their business. With that in mind, what are your top 3 recommendations, takeaways that people can take away, I suppose, and implement into their business?
So I think this is probably a summary of what I said about the past and the future. Actually, I'm a fairly one-track mind about this, which is change is inevitable, and everyone on this call, I suspect, is going through change. That's why we're looking at agility as an organization. And so we all subscribe to it, but people don't typically like change. And so it's worth accepting that and working on the bit about how we make people feel safe within change. There's extreme examples like, well, if I automate this, I might be out of a job. And then they're fairly straightforward to deal with this, but it goes so much deeper with that into people's psyche and, and how they feel within their organization and career ladders and their skill set and how relevant. And so just getting it on the table, looking at it and going like, change inevitable, let's calm down, let's work on it together. So I think accepting people don't like change and therefore creating a culture where change is okay, it's inevitable, and failure is okay. Failure is in fact just the creative process. It's just iteration. But let's fail fast, okay, and let that be okay too. Secondly, for me, it's about really digging in, like not accepting surface answers. And so, if we've read one RFP, we've read 100 in the last few years about, well, we're going to run this agile, right? Okay, are we? Well, okay, it's Wagile, it's Agile. What's that then? Well, actually, procurement, we've got this fixed price contract here, but product team, why don't Agile? Okay, so you're happy then that we think right now we might build a car and that's the right thing for this, but in a couple of years' time, when all this is transformation progress, so we end up with a tricycle, are you going to be right with that? What do you mean? What do you mean a tricycle? We just want a car. I'm like, well, agile means we change and morph with decisions that we make to get the right outcome. But if we've got a definition of success and a modus operandi and a contract that says whatever is the right outcome, it has to have 4 wheels and a steering wheel, and you sit on this side of that, then it's not agile. So let's be truthful. What do we mean by agile, for example? And that's just one of many examples, but getting a common lexicon, a common understanding, which is all part of that psychological safety bit of picturing the future and working together there and having the upfront conversations. Thirdly is resourcing it properly. So again, it's not this lip service, but change is huge. We're not just implementing a new system. We're not just doing a channel shift. It's the organizational change to back up a channel shift online and how we refactor our organizational departments. It's, it really factoring that in. It's not a half-hour training session at the end of a year for the team that are going to run it. That training and onboarding and keeping people in the loop, over communicate, put the time and effort into supporting whatever change gets made so it actually has a chance of succeeding. They're my 3 top tips.
That's brilliant.
Embrace change, dig in, resource things properly.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm conscious of time, but I think we maybe have time for one quick question. Sarah, has any gone into the chat?
Yeah, we have. We've had quite a good question here, but I think we've kind of answered it. But I think, Ian, it might help to just kind of sum up the high points of that. So, are you using any specific tools to help with psychological aspect of change? How do you shift from high discomfort to medium-low discomfort for change?
Wow. Okay. So this is super topical. So been thinking about this a lot over the last few months, and in Mando, as I mentioned, we have been working with a comms training professional over the last year and really investing it. And I was talking to him about what a refresher would look like, and I think what most people don't want is a revision exercise to pass a comms exam. So how can we get people enthralled about the idea of revising our comms strategy? Well, because you want to create a better world, right? But sometimes you have to, if you're getting the comms right, you're really communicating a decision. So actually we need some proper training around decision making. But a lot of the decisions you make won't be the right decision if we're not starting from a psychologically safe place with agendas and talking across purposes. So let's focus on how we structure a meeting so everyone's heard, how we can eliminate fear up front to focus on the issues and then get a better outcome. And that requires a lot of change within people. And so actually, why would I invest in that kind of change? We really need to establish purpose again and go, this is why we're in the business of making a better world, and this is what's needed, and this is why we're doing what we do. We want to make a more accessible, better web for everyone. We want people with Alzheimer's to find it as easy to interact with brands as, you know, a game-head teenager. So we're onboarding to a promo work at Mando around re-establishing the purpose with revision and refreshers, creating a psychologically safe environment so that truth can come out. We can have difficult conversations early. We can establish that truth and create that safety. Decision-making framework. How we're going to roll out that decision for great comms, and follow up, and keep the conversation active. And whether it's good decisions or whether it's everyone embracing mental health, with our wellness strategy, it was never about a box tick and a Twitter hashtag on World Mental Health Day. It was about building it in at the core. And that's lots of little touch points. It's not big training programs. It's an organizational change at our most fundamental values level.
Brilliant. Melissa, I really hope that answers your question. But if you do want any more information on that, just feel free to get in touch with us. But great conversation, guys. Back over to you, Luke.
Bro, thank you very much. All right, well, thanks, Ian. Thanks for joining us this morning, and thanks for those that joined on the call. This will be available on demand, and we'll be going out early next week. So thank you very much for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day.